Oh, here we are, Friday, June 10th, 2022. Sitting out here in my yard. Ravens squawking at me. They're saying, "Show us your tits!" Oh, there's someone over there laughing. Ha ha ha. They're funny. Oh, they're talking back and forth. Yeah. There used to be 3 of them, but the eagle ate one of them. Oh, they got a new one? He says, "No, I'm here now." There was 3, then there was 2. Now there's a new third one. They got a new third wheel. But they laugh at me. They laugh at me when I lay out naked in my yard. They do. I love it. I love being naked in the sunshine. There's only one thing that I enjoy more than being naked in the sunshine, and that is making noise, right? I have a kind of freakish vocal range. It's nearly 5 octaves. Nearly. Like when I'm all warmed up and on the optimum days of my cycle, right? Hormones affect. They do. Hormones affect. Anyway, so the past few years I've been writing books, and I've written a number of books. This year I wrote them out by hand. The other years I've typed them, and the stuff's been stolen off of my laptops, right? People come in and they steal from me all the time. They do. And the cops say that it doesn't matter, right? Nothing I do is worth anything, except that then they go and they make lots of money on it, right? Making commercials for cheap liquor and other shit, right? It's intellectual property. It's real property. Anyway, this is the book I wrote this year. I decided to write it out by hand, and I wrote this. When did I start this? On January 18th. That's when I started it. And when did I finish it? Did I date the last entry? February 3rd. So that's how long it took me to write this book. January 18th to February 3rd. And I've started doing some editing, and I started typing it up, so I could have it printed out. But it's like, why bother, right? Anytime I call and talk to any publishers, they're like, oh no, they won't publish my work, right? They publish my work, then they have to give me credit for it, and they have to pay me for it, right? Right? Meanwhile, all these new books in libraries that they're pushing on kids to read, and parents are all up in arms because, they're all filthy smut, right? I don't write smut. I don't. But this, I write some sensual stuff, but, I don't write smut. No, I don't. This book I called Consenting Adults, an Intimate Exploration. And it's an original work of fiction. And what these are, they're portraits of men. They're portraits of men, and they're not of any actual men. This isn't a documentary. This isn't an autobiography. It's not a biography. These aren't actual people, but the stories are informed by experiences I have had meeting men throughout my life. Right? These are creative impressions of all of the men I have ever met in my life. And I decided to do this because, there's all this, it's all this trans crap. I'm going to call it trans crap. It really fucking is. I can't get health care, gynecological health care, right? Went down to the women's center, and if I wanted to get testosterone shots to shrink my tits and you know, grow hair on my chest, that they would have done that for me, but I couldn't get a fucking pap smear or a mammogram, right? And it's offensive. Oh, some trans person is going to get offended if I talk about what my health issues are and my healthcare needs are. I've never kept any trans person from getting anything, right? But it's okay to discriminate against me, right? And steal from me. And I feel like straight men, are getting short end of the stick too. And I'm saying that as a woman who has been assaulted and abused by straight men. Not all straight men are abusive pricks, right? That's sexist. It's a sexist. I don't hate men. I don't. Not at all. Anyway, I decided that I wanted to write tender portraits of men, and so that's what these are. Each story is a vignette of a different man, right? And there are certain things like that I did consciously in writing this, and one of the things was the woman. The woman is always written from my perspective, but she's not really the focus. You never really know a whole lot about her. Like they never even, her name is never mentioned, right? Like that's the story of my life, right? The men are the only ones that are important. And I feel that way. It's like trans women. It's only the men who are important now, right? You, born with a dick. This isn't a judgment. I'm not saying, oh, I think you're going to go to hell, or I wouldn't offer you communion, or you can't sit at my table, or I wouldn't call you whatever fucking name you want to be called. I'm saying that you're screwing me over and a lot of other women. We can't have our needs met just because you're not happy with the body you were born in. And I think that's selfish. I think it's totally selfish. Anyway, so in these stories, the woman's name isn't mentioned. And it's written from the man's perspective, each vignette. And I also have made a concerted effort to not mention race in any way, shape, or form. Now, there's a couple places where I have, and those things are being edited. But that was a very conscious decision as well, because I'm sick of that narrative also. That somehow we're different species. Race is a construct, right? Everybody's just, obsessed over color palette. Oh my God. So obsessed with what the surface is that you miss the continuity of humanity. And drawing attention to it over and over and over again just reinforces an unbalanced narrative. So they're love stories. They are. They're love stories, but they're portraits of men. This was my attempt at compassion towards men. That's what these are. So, let me pick one. And each story is named. The title of each story is the name of the man that is in the story. Here are all these bugs flying around me again. I must smell like shit. No, I just live in the woods. Oh, here's one that I wrote a couple days before my birthday. And the way I would write these. Oh, there's one. Did I write one on my birthday? I did. Or no, I did write. Well, I tried to finish them when I sat down to write them, but the one that I was writing on my birthday was when I was finishing. So should I read the one the day before my birthday, or should I read the one the day after my birthday? Lawrence or Orin? The one that I wrote on my birthday is called Saeed. I'll read. I'm going to read Orin. I wrote this on January 24th, 2022. I just sat down and just wrote. It was first thing in the morning. Got up in the morning. That was my process. It was the first thing I did. I got up, went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and then sat up with my pen and paper and wrote. Orin. For 7 years, Orin had been keeping a secret. It was just a small thing, but even a small thing could be very heavy. At first, it seemed like no big deal, but each time he visited his father, the secret gained in weight to the point that he only visited him now twice a year, even though the nursing home was only a 40-minute drive from his house. Orin had been living alone in his childhood home for 10 years, since the accident, out of necessity. His job at the thrift shop was as much as he could bear, and it didn't pay well. On cool fall mornings, he still sometimes woke up in what would have been time to make it to morning conditioning. Then the pain in his arm and leg reminded him of reality, and it was like he was waking up in the hospital all over again, being told by strangers what had happened. After coming to terms with the initial loss, he had finally come to the conclusion that his little brother, Leslie, was the lucky one. He had died on impact and been spared the pain of living in the aftermath, or his name for that matter. Leslie was all boy through and through, but Orin knew he had to put up with regular taunting by other boys, and some girls too, for the family name his parents saddled him with. It may have sounded a bit shallow, but it helped Orin get out of bed on bad days. His father was awake when paramedics arrived on the scene, but the paralysis was neck down and permanent. His mother was unconscious, and when she finally came out of the coma, the closed head injury had robbed her of her kindness and left her with unpredictable seizures. The seatbelt that was supposed to have protected Leslie had pulled across the boy's neck in such a way that it had broken, and he had died instantly. Orin had been knocked unconscious and suffered a shattered leg, pelvis, and shoulder. 4 surgeries had helped, but the nerve damage was permanent, and the scars were ugly, and his football career was over before it ever really started. He still couldn't bear to watch a game, and when his favorite player had come to visit as a surprise gift from the hospital staff, Orin had to be sedated because he had become hysterical, and the doctor had been scared he might undo the delicate surgery he was recovering from. The football player had cried, not because his feelings were hurt, but because he understood how the boy felt. In some ways, it was a blessing because he felt so moved. He had paid for Orin's mother's home care when she was released before Orin, and the care and upkeep of the house in the meantime. He'd been quite generous, and the thank you letter Orin had eventually written was the last football-related thing he ever did or wanted to do. It was Father's Day, and Orin was trying to prepare himself for his visit. Maybe it was time he finally told his father. It killed him every time he visited and saw the giant framed wedding photo his aunt had hung at the foot of his father's bed, and the way his father spoke of his mother as if she were still alive, even though he knew quite well she had been dead for years. Orin's mother, in a fit of rage, had blurted the secret out just before going into a grand mall. She choked on her tongue and died right before a helpless Orin. At first, Orin had written it off as a confused rant, but when he mentioned it to his Uncle Jeff at the funeral, he learned otherwise. Uncle Jeff was his father's older half-brother. For the first year of Orin's parents' marriage, his father had been deployed in Korea. Eventually, a shrapnel injury would send him home, but while he was gone, it was hard, evidently, and Orin's mother and Uncle Jeff shared an evening together. Jeff had a birth defect that had kept him from the draft. Jeff assured Orin it only happened once, and that his mother had loved his father and had even called out his name in the throes of passion. It was more information than Orin cared to have, but it had happened so long ago, and his parents had never seemed anything other than devoted to each other, so he just tucked it away in the back of his mind, where he kept things like the name of the college recruiter they had been on their way to meet the day of the accident. Orin showered and dressed, then chugged a Coca-Cola before getting in his used Toyota Camry to head to the nursing home. Kids down the street were playing kickball, and he had to wait for them to move the goals for him to leave the neighborhood. His stomach growled a little. It would be about lunchtime when he arrived. Orin had called the day before and spoke to the woman at the nurse's station to arrange for him to have lunch with his father out in the butterfly garden. The woman obliged, as she always did. Orin wondered if she lived somewhere on the nursing home grounds. She always seemed to be there whenever he called to check on his father or visited. Orin appreciated the woman's pleasant demeanor and the fact that she never pried or attempted awkward small talk or spoke to his father like he was a child. Orin's father was a large man, and as such was even more difficult to move. For the first 2 years, he had been in a private room because of this, but the facility built a new wing with accommodations for larger patients, and they moved him there once they were ready. He now had a morbidly obese roommate. Albin was 80, with a severe hormone disorder and no family. Both men were devout Christians and accepted each other's company. Albin was good-natured enough, and he knew topics to avoid on Orin's visits. Orin was grateful his father had a friend, and even more grateful for the hefty settlement he received from the drunk driver that hit them, that paid for the cost of the private facility. Orin's meager paycheck was enough to pay his property taxes, utilities, and humble personal needs. His father had made the final mortgage payment just 6 months before the accident. When Orin wasn't at the thrift store, he spent his time listening to classical music and gardening. Most days, the roses along the fence were the only good memory of his mother he could recall, without distress. Orin didn't watch TV or listen to the radio, lest he be subjected to scores or stats, or insipid women or childish men. It was safe to say that Orin kept to himself. There were no mirrors in the house anymore, and he refrained from looking at his body, even in the shower. He accepted long ago that the scars were most certainly too ugly to expect any woman to look at day in and day out. Even in the month of June, Orin wore long sleeves and pants. When he pulled into the parking lot of the nursing home, he could see his father in his special chair already in place in the garden. An orderly was adjusting a fishing hat on his head to shade his eyes from the sun. His father's 6.5-foot frame, once strong and lithe, now strapped in place and somewhat bloated. Orin locked the car and headed to the front desk to sign in. He passed tables of lively visitors with mylar balloons emblazoned with the words, "Happy Father's Day." The woman was at the desk on the phone. She cradled the receiver as Orin approached. Orin pumped some hand sanitizer into his palm before picking up the pen to sign in, then pumped some more just to be safe. "Mr. Stevenson, your father's in the garden waiting for you, but I need to let you know, Albin passed away last night, and your father is quite upset today," the woman said with compassion. Orin's heart sank lower than it already was. "Oh, thank you for letting me know," he replied, and turned toward the hall leading to the door out to the garden. The woman watched as Orin walked away. Orin called out to his father as he approached. The orderly had already moved on to assist another resident at an adjacent table. "Dad, I'm here," he said as kindly as he could, as he rounded his father's left shoulder. "Orin, Albin's dead," his father said. "Yeah, I just heard. I'm sorry, Dad." "I can't believe Albin's gone," his father said. It was the same thing he had said when Orin's mother died, and the tone in his voice was the same as well. "Who is going to read scripture with me now?" he asked Orin. "I'm sure someone will, Dad. It won't be the same." "No, it won't, Dad. It will be someone different." The Stevensons had not been church-going folks, so Orin really didn't know how to comfort his father. Before the accident, Orin had been on the fence about God. After the accident, he was convinced God was a lie. His father had gone the other way. It was also part of what made visiting so difficult. 2 covered lunch trays sat on the table in front of Orin and his father. Orin lifted one of the tray lids. "Let's see what we've got." It looked like pot roast and gravy with mashed potato and creamed spinach, but who knew? The food pretty much all tasted the same. There was also a piece of chocolate cake. "I just want the cake," Orin's father said. "And they forgot the milk." Tears started to well in Orin's father's eyes. "It's okay, Dad. I'll go get some." Orin picked up a napkin and wiped his father's eyes before heading back toward the nurse's station. Pushing the button to open the door, Orin thought to himself, "I can't tell him. Not today." As the door opened, he saw the woman standing next to a tall rack on wheels, filled with lunch trays. Her back was toward him. "Excuse me, my father would like some milk to go with his cake. Do you have an extra?" The woman turned to him with a smile. "Oh, I'm sorry, certainly." She pulled a milk carton from the side-mounted container and handed it to Orin. "Will my father be getting a new roommate?" Orin asked. "Probably, but it may take a day or two," the woman answered. "It would be nice if they were Christian," Orin said. "We'll try, but I can't promise you that. I can promise we do our best to match roommate personalities, though." As Orin had reached for the milk carton, the sleeve of his shirt had pulled back a bit, revealing the beginning of the hard rope-like scars just above his wrist. The woman saw but said nothing. Orin figured she had probably seen worse and didn't feel self-conscious. "Thank you," he said as he turned to rejoin his father. "I hope 1% is okay," Orin said as he sat down. His father's chin was dipped down and the hat was covering his eyes and nose. Orin opened the milk and unwrapped the paper straw on the tray. He turned toward his father before asking, "Do you want cake or milk first?" Orin's father didn't respond. "Come on, Dad, let's try to enjoy the day. Uncle Jeff said he'd come see you in a couple days." Orin lied, but would tell Jeff when he got home. Orin's father still didn't respond. Frustrated, Orin reached out and lifted his father's hat. His eyes were open, and he was already gone. Orin stood up, dropping the milk on the ground and splashing his father's useless feet. "Help me! Help me!" Orin cried. 2 orderlies came running from another table where a man was sitting with 2 teenagers and a middle-aged woman. They pushed Orin aside and checked his father for a pulse. Then one pulled a walkie-talkie from his belt and said, "Code Paradise in the Garden." Orin stood aside and watched as 3 nurses and the woman from the desk came rushing out the doors toward them. The woman approached Orin and gently touched his shoulder. Her hand was warm through his shirt. He was sure she could feel the large knob-like scar protrusion beneath. "Mr. Stevenson, let them take care of your dad. Come with me." Orin turned to her, mouth open, and nodded. The woman turned and began toward a different door just to the left of the one they had come through and pulled a key card from her pocket. Orin followed just behind. A narrow hallway opened behind the other door. It was quiet and cool and was lined with 4 doors on one side and a door at the end. The woman walked to the last door and inserted the key card. She opened the door and ushered Orin in before her. Orin was surprised to be standing in what looked like a decent hotel room. "We have these rooms for families to stay at the end phases of hospice," she explained as the door closed behind her. "Your father was unresponsive. I don't know if you know, but he had a no resuscitation order. They will care for him and arrange him in his room for you to sit with for a while if you like, and you may stay here tonight also, if you like." Orin was in shock. All of a sudden, he was hot. He began to roll his sleeves back to the elbow. The woman now approached him and brought her eyes to meet him. "I'm very sorry," she said, as she reached to calm Orin's frantic hands. "Would you like to show me your scars?" she asked. Orin stopped and stood straight. "Yes, I would. Thank you." "Oh, That one always makes me want to cry. I cried when I wrote it. I spent a lot of time in nursing homes, visiting. And when we lived in Oakland, a few times I went and visited people that were in nursing homes who didn't have family to visit them. And that is a blessing. It is hard. And I gotta think of my mother-in-law in the nursing home. And she is such a difficult person. She's been so intrusive and difficult in our life. And we can't visit her. It's never pleasant. Even before she was in a nursing home, visits with her were never, ever pleasant. And Lord knows we tried. But there are so many different reasons why it can be hard to visit someone. So many different reasons. And trauma comes in so many different forms. So many different forms. It was hard being at the hospice when my father-in-law was dying, not because it was hard for me to be with him. That was actually quite easy. I had no trouble sitting with him. It was hard being with my mother-in-law and my husband. And I ultimately left because my mother-in-law told me to leave. She didn't want me there. And that was her intimacy, right? My husband didn't ask me to stay. He didn't want me there either. Omar's father begged me to stay. He begged me. But I didn't, out of respect for my mother-in-law and the privacy and the intimacy of spousal relationship. And there is nothing more intimate than being in the room with someone as they die. Nothing. I am grateful my grandfather died in his sleep. My pappy. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that he got to do that. Didn't have to share it with anyone. Anyway, I'll share more of these. I'll share more of these stories. I don't know how many there are. I don't know. Let's see. I'll count and see how many there are. Let's see, we got Denny. That's one. Lawrence, 2. Saeed, 3. And Orin is 4. Then we have Randall. Randall's 5. Corey, 6. Stuart, 7. Oh, I like Stuart. That's one that I like. I say Stuart's 6 or 7. I don't remember now. Ellis, he's 7 or 8. Is Ellis the last one? I think Ellis might be the last one. Yes, 8. Yeah, that's what it was 8. Like the 8 archangels. Angels are without gender. I think that's interesting. Anyway, have a good day.